I'm Sean Cole. This is the Simpit, and there is something that I have wanted to do on this show for a very long time, and today is the day. Welcome to the debut of Junkyard Rigs, where we take trash and we turn it into treasure, or at least we try to. So for this first edition, we are going to take a shopping cart and turn it into a sim racing chassis. And you might be thinking to yourself, a shopping cart? Really? Yes, that is the goal of the day, to take our DIY skills to the next level and turn this piece of trash into a treasure or a sim racing chassis. Now before we get started, let me just say, this whole thing could end up a total disaster. We could end up with a broken shopping cart and a pile of scrap metal, but that is the beauty of Junkyard Rigs. We're not afraid to fail spectacularly. So get ready, buckle up for a wild ride, and let's see if we can turn this piece of junk into a perfect sim racing chassis. Who knows, maybe we'll end up with something faster than a Ferrari, but we're more likely going to end up with something slower than a tortoise. So let's get started. As I stood in front of the shopping cart, I began to assess the situation. My goal was to turn this humble piece of junk into a sim racing chassis. But before I could do that, I needed to identify the usable pieces. After a few minutes of examination, I started the breakdown phase, deconstructing the cart and isolating the main pieces of metal that I could use. Next, I started piecing together the individual pieces to create the chassis. I discovered that the bottom loop of the cart was the strongest portion and would serve as the foundation for the rig, providing the necessary stability. I used the push handle from the cart by cutting it into 3 pieces to create 2 braces to support the main loop on both sides. I drilled some holes and added connector braces and then bolted them all together at the top. Towards the bottom, I drilled a couple more holes and bolted the braces to the loop. This put the little curved part of the handles on the ground, nicely supporting the upright. I then grabbed the basket and threw some extra mesh to create a seat back so I could test out the size. The front wheel stand was almost the right size and shape, and it seemed pretty strong as well. To tackle the wheel deck, I cut a V shape out of each side so that I could bend it down until the angle closed in that V, giving me a level wheel deck. I hopped back in the rig to test out the height and angle, and it was pretty close, just a little bit high maybe, but I could just raise the bottom of the seat a few inches and achieve the desired height or have them match properly. For the seat, I used the mesh pieces that were the flapping gate on the back side of the cart. I used the hook ends to connect it to the back of the basket, and then a couple of U-bolts to hold the front edge to the sides of the basket. This raised the bottom of the seat off the ground to the right height for the deck. It also provided a softer seat and strengthened the basket by connecting it in the middle. I used the bottom mesh from the cart that I used to hold 12 packs of soda to create an angle for the seat back. To finalize the wheel deck, I used the plates that were cut off from the main loop during deconstruction. They weren't super thick, but they are long enough to reach vertically from the deck to the sides. So I drilled some holes and bolted them in place, one on each side of the wheel stand to strengthen the deck. For the pedal deck, I only had one piece of that larger strong mesh, and it was a little too big. So I trimmed it down in a couple of spots for clearance and then held it down with about 50 zip ties. I added some angle to this deck since the rig had sort of a low slung, almost F1 style in its position. At this point, the rig was almost done, but it was in 2 halves, which would be fine until I actually moved it into the sim room. I measured and drilled some holes for the Moza R16 wheelbase, which I plan to mount to this wheel deck. I do have enough confidence to handle 16 Newton meters because I think the wheel deck is the strongest part of the entire rig. After the holes were drilled, the rig was pretty much complete or ready for final assembly. It was now time to take that Frankenstein of a baby into the studio and set it up with equipment. We'll see how our predictions and measurements actually worked out. I first mounted the R16 wheelbase to the deck, which went perfectly and felt pretty solid. So far, so good. But the pedals, they were a different challenge. This deck is springy and has no real way of mounting anything to it. So it was back to the zip ties. It was either that or duct tape. And with a couple handfuls of zip ties later, the pedals were actually mounted. I think. Can you just hear my confidence now? On my first setting test with the gear, I found out the seat was not comfortable. It was at a good angle, and the wheel was in a good spot as well. However, my pedals were at the wrong angle, and the mesh pedal deck was not strong enough for these pedals. I then remounted the pedal mesh at a slightly raised and more flat of an angle, again with zip ties holding it all in place. That includes zip ties holding down the Moza pedals, which are still strong but not quite as much load as the Ricmotex. And with that, I could attach the two halves together. I then added an old throw blanket for some paddings, and we have ourselves a rig. I will say the rig came out much better than I thought. What started out as sort of a joke turned into something that just might work out and cost us nothing, nada, zip, zilch, zero to make. Alright, so this is my first drive in the rig. I have not turned a single lap. I've calibrated. I've made sure that everything works. I've made some slight tweaks and adjustments. I got a little padding under me and behind me. But it is time to see if this thing works. 16 Newton meters. Let's see what it can do. Oh, I need some audio. Got a little headphone holder there even. Alright, we're underway. You guys are going to see better than I will because I'm driving. It is feeling remarkably stable. I can definitely feel a little flex in that wheel in the pedal deck area under braking. When I'm on the gas, it feels real good. I'm happy with the gas feeling. It feels solid. It's the right angle, the right distance. The braking under light, everything's fine, but when I press hard, I can definitely tell that the center of that whole platform is bowing in. Now, is it to the point of problem? I don't think it is. And there are a lot of ways we could stiffen that up. All we've used to build this is the shopping cart itself. There are no other pieces. I could add a piece of wood, a little 2x4 underneath to brace it. I had a little trouble mounting the pedals. I just used zip ties to hold them in place. Seems to be holding up, but on a more permanent solution, I would again look for something a little better. I'm fine with that mesh being the surface or the mounting area. It's only zip tied in position down there. I could probably over time find a better way to mount that, maybe with some brackets or bolts or something. But throwing it together on a zero budget, that was the main thing. You know, all I used was zip ties and some bolts that I had laying around. And I am in a drivable rig. I am using a Moza heavy-duty pedal set, a 16 Newton meter wheel. I am comfortable. I am in a good driving position. Now, I couldn't make any adjustments. If you came over to drive my rig, all I could do is undo the zip ties down here and move the basket backward. Oh, we're going to go off track here. We held it together. So here, let's play. Let's see the steering wheel. Let's put it under heavy load. Heavy load on the steering wheel. Going into the corner hard. Really going to jam on the brakes here. Really going to turn in. Really accentuating the wheel's action. Okay, I see a little bit of wiggle. I see a little bit of jump. Whoa, into the wall. We're going to have to try another car. The Mazda, now that I think about it, is a muted car. We're going to reset real quick and get in. Ooh, I heard some knocking. Oh, my pedal deck just slid down. Did you see that? I got a little angle adjustment. Now we have just a little bit of angle or rake on that. Let's see if it holds into position. The amount of wiggle, I think that's just the entire chassis moving as much as this wheel deck. This feels as solid and as robust as about any rig. Now, the problem is I have no front to back. I have no angle. I have no up and down adjustability. It's just that I built the rig for me, which if you're doing a rig for yourself out of a shopping cart, you're probably doing it for you, not for everybody. Like I said, I could undo these zip ties, slide the basket back. That's the one adjustment I could make. This was the only piece of metal I had left over, this mesh that was the original gate on the shopping cart. and I tried it in a few different places, and it was a little tricky. I didn't have any brackets that were going to work. All I did was put a bunch of zip ties to hold it in place, and you can see it did move, so that's not great. That's not great at all. Pedals are just zip tied. The pedals have not moved on the deck at all, so that part seems to be adequate, but you can see the flex when I push on it like that. Now, a few solutions that would solve that. Just one piece of additional metal, a piece of profile tubing. I could mount the pedals to the profile, mount the profile across that mesh, and probably get a lot more stability. Even better, just stuff some 2x4s under here, and it's going to not only prevent it from sliding down anymore, but it's going to give you that stability as well. Didn't have any laying around, but most people probably have 2x4s in the garage. It would be a very simple fix, but it seemed to be driving very well. Now we're going to drive in a car with a little more force feedback and a little more bite and see how the rig does there. Now this shopping cart was abandoned at my complex. I did not steal this, this shopping cart. All right, so now we do have some fight on that wheel with this radical 16 Newton meters fighting us. And I'm running it at pretty full strength. I'm running it 8.8 in iRacing, 75% I believe in Moza software. So this is a stronger than I would race amount of pressure right now. Whoa. Yeah, I could race on this rig. I could race on this rig for, oh! And not only could I race on this rig, this is just stage one. I mean, like, again, I haven't used a single part that wasn't. The only thing that isn't part of the rig, I've got these U-bolts. I've got a handful of bolts and plates. I've got 50 zip ties. I thought I'd use duct tape, but there's none in the process here. Everything else is the shopping cart itself. The only part we didn't use was a little piece of mesh about this big. The handle that was part of the push handle, the wheels, and then the plastic pieces. Oh, I could use those plastic edges to cover right there for handrails now that I think about it. But it has far exceeded my expectations. It is a good, solid rig. And it was a fun project to do, and I gotta say, I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I'm pretty darn proud. All right, now I'm gonna just drive for pleasure. In the end, it took me about 2 days to complete the project, and I will say the entire thing is made of the shopping cart. I used 99% of the shopping cart to do the process. All I had to add to complete the job were 4 brackets, 8 bolts, about 100 zip ties, an old throw blanket, and this old pillow, all costing me absolutely nothing. So it was literally a free rig. Now, is it perfect? No, it certainly isn't. But with a little more time, I could make it even better. I could join the basket to the front a little bit better. I could reinforce that pedal deck, all making it better. Just give me another shopping cart. Who knows what we could finish in the end. So overall, it came out so much better than I thought. As I mentioned earlier, I thought it was sort of a joke, but it really did impress me. It really did come out a solid, usable rig. So I'm not advising you to go out and build your own, but if you do, you have to send me pictures. I got to see what your results are, but I'm hoping it motivated you to think outside of the cart, outside of the box, for what you could do to build your own rig. You might be able to build a rig for free, and saving money on the rig is going to give you that much more money to get a good wheel kit or a good pedal set, and you get the satisfaction of doing it yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can find out when our next one comes out. And most of all, thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.